It's that time, everybody. Here we are for another episode of the Corner Blue. It is episode 12. We're so close to Thanksgiving, so close to the holidays. The year's winding down, and all we can do is take a deep breath, right? What a crazy year. But here we are once again. I'm here with Hugo Alvarado. I'm Andrés Rico, and thanks again for joining us. It's been a crazy week, so we had to stall one day, everybody. But here we are once again. And basically to talk about the news of the year, I guess, in a sense, right? The national team finally has a friendly. Yes, you heard it here correctly. They've scheduled a friendly before the year ends against none other than the United States. Looks like the game's going to be played December 9th in Fort Lauderdale at Inter Miami's new stadium. And it's exciting. It's not every day that El Salvador gets to play a rival in the CONCACAF beyond Guatemala, Honduras. It's nice to see them being able to play a national team that is, in the top tier of the area. So it's definitely something to look forward to. And hopefully it'll be televised here in the US and hopefully abroad as well. But Hugo, how was it managing that whole situation of trying to look for a match? November was tricky. What's the word around the federation in terms of this match?
Well, like you said, I think it's a great match, regardless of whether the U.S. will be able to bring any of the foreign-based players, or if we're going to end up seeing a combination of MLS-based players, which is probably what's going to happen, given that it's outside of the FIFA dates. Um, I as a scout for the federation, my goal and intention is always to try to contribute in however role I can, and given my great connections and some of the friendships and contacts that I've gained throughout the years as a player's agent and other roles that I've done in the soccer world. I happen to have good communication with Greg Berhalter, the national team, U.S. national team coach, and I reached out to him and to look into the possibility of playing in November. But they already had a couple games scheduled in Europe, so we talked about possibly December. It seems like they were interested. El Salvador was interested, and then from there, I just basically handed out that over to the federation to finalize all the details. But that's basically how it happened. And yes, I think it's going to be a great match. Very exciting to see La Selecta play for the second time this year. Friendly match. So it's been a while. So we are definitely looking forward to that game.
Well, props for stepping out of the box, because your official title is scout, but obviously we know that throughout these years you've been involved in different facets and angles of the game, of the industry. Because you've organized matches in the past, right? You dabbled a little bit in that in the past, right?
Yeah. I've been involved in bringing Alianza against FC Dallas a few years back in Frisco. And then we also brought Santa Tecla to play FC Dallas, same Frisco, Texas. I developed a great relationship with Fernando Clavijo, rest in peace, and we were able to organize some of those matches. So yes, I've gained some experience in that area, and why not contribute in that way if I can with my connections.
And in terms of the U.S. National team or their camp, did you hear anything from them of kind of what was their reasoning for playing for El Salvador? Did that ever come up, or it was just, hey, we're trying to stay active, we're winding down the year? Because I know the U.S. played with its mostly foreign based players the last couple of FIFA match days. So I was wondering, are they going to be using more of the MLS players?
Yeah, I don't know those details. I mean, all I know is that there was instant openness from Berhalter to work something out. When November was not an option, he actually brought up, how about December? And I checked with the federation in El Salvador, and that was definitely something of interest, and that's kind of how everything went. So I don't know any details. I would think, just given that it's outside of the FIFA dates, and with all the difficulties with the COVID and traveling from Europe into the US, I would say that most likely it's going to be um, US-based players and any other US player south of the border. I would say that's playing south of the border. I think they do have. I think there might be a player in Brazil or something like that. I can't think of the name right now, but I think that there might be a couple players from probably the Mexican League or South America that might be of interest to the U.S. coach. But I would think that it might be an MLS based
Yeah, probably all
squad.
the players that are basically out of contention with the playoffs, because MLS playoffs started today, will continue for the next couple of weeks. So it'll be interesting. I mean, not you can't look at the MLS players as, a completely lower tier than those in Europe. Obviously, the players in Europe are mostly young. They're still on the come up. A lot of them are starting to just establish themselves in their new leagues. But I'd say the U.S. has a pretty interesting, base of domestic players to work with as well.
Yeah, and one thing to consider, I think you just mentioned, I think it's worth highlighting that the U.S. right now has a very interesting pool of players. I mean, if you look at the team that just played in Europe, you're like really, wondering what the U.S. will be capable of doing in 2026. It's a very, very good team. And why am I saying that? I'm saying that because if the U.S. happens to play with local players, those local players will probably want to show Berhalter that they have what it takes to compete against those European-based players. So I think it can be a very, very interesting match for El Salvador and for the U.S. because yes, there's a lot of talks right now here in the U.S. about how exciting this young team that just played against Wales and Panama is. And look, I mean, they slaughter Panama. So I think those domestic players will want to get out there and show Berhalter that they at least deserve to be called into a camp when the qualifiers come next year.
Yeah, it's definitely also a reflection of the style and the systems that are being developed within MLS, that players so young are being able to make that transition to the big powerhouse leagues in Europe. But also in El Salvador's case, what would be interesting, and I mean, I don't know how much info you have on that, but is there an agreement with La Liga Mayor and La FESFUT in terms of lending players, since it's not an official FIFA match day, or is that still up in the air?
Yeah, I don't have any details on those things other than what we all know, what we read in the media. There could be negotiations. The first division hasn't really said yes or no, but they just mentioned that they're willing to work it out. So yeah, in this case, in that regards, I just know what everyone knows from the media reports.
And it seems that different to his first stint as the coach for La Selecta, it seems that La FESFUT and De Los Cobos definitely have a better relationship with La Liga in terms of being able to get the players for mini camps, the famous microciclos, that before, I remember there would always be some type of stalemate. The teams wouldn't want to lend their players. And ironically, it was through the national team that many of these players ended up being able to move abroad and bring more attention to the league in El Salvador. But I think this time around, hopefully, that improved relationship in comparison to the last time around continues.
Yeah, and again, with COVID, everything's different. I mean, it's amazing how much it affects every area of the sport. Um, because as we all know, that the teams over there depend a lot on the ticket sales. And, right now the number of people allowed into stadiums is very, very limited. And in some cases, there's been negotiations, to have the federation cover some of the players' salaries when they go to the national team. And right now with COVID, everyone's really, being hit financially. So I really hope, that both the federation and the league can really work together and loan the players so that we can have a good team. But yes, I wouldn't. This is just a personal opinion. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some complications as a result that it's outside of the FIFA dates, COVID, and players losing. Teams losing their best players. There might have to be compromise. It could be something where a team says, "Okay, we can only do three players per team or 4 players per team." I don't know. It'll be interesting to see, but hopefully they can work it out.
Yeah, in that sense, that's what's so funny about the MLS schedule. It always seems odd to everyone outside of the US, including many fans within the US, of the span of the season, the timing of everything. But it's funny how it works so perfectly so that there's this basically dead spell, this off season right at the end of the year, where it totally works for the national team to get guys together and try and stay active. And in this case, it seems like, yeah, it's going to take a little more strings to pull for La Selecta. But hopefully this match, happens, because I think it would be a huge benefit to El Salvador to get some pieces going, meet up for only the second time in the year for a match, and start looking towards 2021, because there's a lot on the horizon.
Definitely.
Well, and along with that, there was a press conference recently where Hugo Carrillo mentioned some of the players that, their names are floating around to be called up for this match, considering that it's still up in the air whether or not the domestic players are going to be released to play in the match against the U.S. He mentioned the possible return of Dustin Correa, which seems like an interesting option. Also, Joaquin Rivas, that plays in the U.S. And then there were some doubts with Pablo Puñet being able to play. But in social media, he even cleared up the fact that he has a U.S. national passport. So traveling from Europe to the U.S. wouldn't be an issue. So we'll see how that stands, travel and everything. We don't know if that might even change, considering that, in many states there's this resurge occurring, including in our home state of California. There's a curfew being imposed starting Saturday night. So things seem pretty dicey. I'm just going to continue being optimistic and hope that this match comes to fruition.
President Carrillo mentioned, those names out there of potential players that can be called up. It makes sense. If you look at those names, they're not playing. They're not active, so that can also be a little bit of a concern. Dustin just left his team in Guatemala, I think a couple weeks ago, actually. And Joaquin Rivas, his season ended about a month ago. Then you also have Junior Burgos. I don't know if his name was mentioned, but he's also another player that it only makes sense. They live in the U.S. There's nothing going on in their leagues, so they're available. And Pablo, he's been active. Season ended in Iceland. He has a new team, but there's no league happening right now, so it seems likely that he's able to travel. And given that he does have a U.S. passport, that helps him a lot with the COVID travel restrictions that have been set throughout Europe. Most of those European nationals cannot come into the U.S.
Yeah, and we'll see what the ramifications of the virus are. I think the best way of looking at this match, if it happens due to the delicate situation that's going on, is it'll be like your dream mini camp or your ideal mini camp, where ranking's not on the line, points aren't on the line. You want to fine tune or at least give your your inactive players some action, bring them together, try and work on that cohesion, because these guys haven't been together since February. I mean, there have been some mini camps along the way, but the players playing abroad haven't been able to be a part of that at all. So if anything, I hope this mini camp just serves to get things going, because I mean the next FIFA match day isn't until March. So that's like a 4-month gap there. So at this point, whatever you can get, I think De Los Cobos is going to try and follow up on.
Yes, and also, a factor that, I mean, I've heard some of the European teams talk about, but it's a different scenario playing games without fans. And it'll be good for the national team to get used to that, because the way things are going come March, I don't think there's going to be much of a change with COVID and playing on empty stadiums. So in that sense, playing that game closed doors can also be a good way of adapting into the new reality. And I think for players, it's very difficult. I mean, there's the fans we've heard about. I mean, let's just use El Cusco as an example. That's one of our strength, is being able to play with our fans. And then you hear, like other teams in South America and even a club level, and some players are saying, playing without fans is like, there's no reason, because the sport was designed for that, to have the
Yeah,
fans
it's
there next to you. So
counterproductive and dry.
yeah, so it takes a different mentality, a different approach from the players to stay motivated, during those games without having fans there. So I think even if you look at it from that perspective, playing this friendly match in an empty stadium can be a good way for our players, that El Salvador players, to get used to that, because the qualifiers might have to start that way.
And stepping back a little bit from the analysis of the match, there's nothing like a U.S. El Salvador match. I feel like for a lot of us born in the U.S. of Salvadoran parents, or those of us that moved to the United States from El Salvador, this match always brings up just weird sensations all around. For you, Hugo, how do you live these matches? Because granted, the U.S. has pretty much dominated El Salvador when it comes to the head-to-head scoreline. Basically, the last 4 matches have all been U.S. wins. And I think we've only had one win against the U.S. I was too young to see it, so I don't know what that looks like. But what does this type of match bring up for you?
It's interesting because, in many World Cups, I support the U.S. That's kind of like my team, because I live in the U.S., because I'm an American citizen, and many other reasons. But when they play El Salvador, it's a different story. It's a different story. Of course, now I see it differently. I see it from a different scope. Um, I part of what I do is I scout for those players that could play for both countries. So to me, it's always interesting and to watch and analyze the games and see how, some of those players that the U.S. may not be interested in calling, how those players can have a huge impact for us. And obviously, I mean, the U.S. is a power, along with Mexico. I mean, the U.S. and Mexico are the top teams in the area, so it's always exciting to watch those games. And of course, I want El Salvador to win, because when if we beat the U.S., we're beating a very good national team, top 2 in CONCACAF.
Yeah, for me, what comes to mind whenever I hear a U.S. and Salvador match is the video, that one fight of like all Salvadorans. I think it was either New York or Washington D.C. after the U.S. had beat El Salvador, and there's like Salvadoran fans with the U.S. team, and then obviously Salvadorans fan with the Selecta jersey, and they're just going at. I'm just like, oh my god. But anyway, beyond that, Yeah, it is weird watching a U.S. El Salvador match. I mean, I'm gonna confess that the '94 World Cup, I was rooting for the U.S. Granted, it was happening here, like in our backyard, basically. So it was kind of hard not to support the U.S. I was a little kid too, and I remember my uncles looking at me weird, like rooting for the U.S. against Colombia. And I think that's why they didn't take me to go see the match against Brazil at Stanford. They left my ass at home. I was 6, but I still was able to record on a VHS. So at least I was a little smart back then. But anyway, I'm deviating. But yeah, after that, I don't know. I kind of just focused on La Selecta. Never really rooted for them. I'm not gonna lie until maybe like 2014. Or it was around that time. I guess just peer pressure and then going to bars or pubs to watch World Cup games and whatnot. Like, I'll root for them. Fine, whatever. But I remember for a long time, I just couldn't stand the U.S., especially when they'd play us. El Salvador is such a soccer nation. It's so important. And then, it's crickets when it comes to the U.S. national team for the most part, at least throughout the 80s, 90s, early 2000s. No one was following the U.S. national team for the most part here. And so when they beat us, it was always like a slap in the face. Like, really? Like, you guys don't even appreciate the sport. And here our hopes are on the lines. And all you see is these tall dudes scoring off of free kicks, corner kicks, rebounds, and us looking really bad. But I think what helped turn things around definitely was in 2009 when finally we got some interesting results against them. You remember them, Uwe. Do you want to talk about those?
Yeah. Um, I have one very very good memory actually. I was vacationing Napa during the 2010 World Cup, and the U.S. was playing Ghana. I believe it was against Ghana, um, and I was basically telling my girlfriend at that time, I really want to go watch the game, but I don't think we can find a place to watch it in Napa. And then we found this pub, and then we go, and the place was packed. I mean, it was packed that they had to open the second floor and put some TVs in there, almost like, I remember in the 90s going to watch the Circuito Cerrado games at restaurants and paying like $20 and then having and being obligated to buy some drinks and food, and the game ended up costing like $50 per person to watch it on TV. And so that was just a great memory of watching the US. But going back to recently, what has happened, there's been some really like heartbreaking moments because we had like in the 2010 qualifiers. I mean, well, let's go even back further
Oh,
back to
whoa,
the
whoa,
France
whoa.
98.
Yeah.
France 98, right? When we played in Boston, I think, and it was like, why is the US taking El Salvador to a place full of snow where the whole like the sideline was full of snow? And I remember the Salvadorian players saying that they had never seen snow before. And we had Nilson de Melo, and basically we were still alive. We had to beat the US, which we knew was a long shot. But it was a good game. I think it was like 4-2. It
Yeah.
ended up being like a
Yeah.
4-2 game. Uh, that was kind of like heartbreaking. But then more recently, when in El Cusca, we were up like by 2, I think, and we
Mhm.
ended up tying that
With like
game.
8 minutes left in the second half, like I remember thinking, like, is this real? Like because we scored that that beautiful goal, the first goal that Cheo scored, the combination with
That was like one of the best plays. Yeah,
with
the best
Fito,
combination.
Sael, and then Cheo just hitting up that second post with the left foot. That was amazing. And then when Christian
Castillo's goal,
Castillo like got a goal
beating
in the
Frankie
air,
Hayduk.
yeah,
It
in
was
the
just like,
air, I was like, what
yeah,
the in
yeah,
the air, like air attack us against these
yeah,
tall MFs, like
yeah.
what?
And then he
Yeah,
did it again. He did it again when they played in the U.S. the second match. Kind of like the same, kind of like a replay. It was like a
yeah,
Fito play to Castillo, and then he just came out of nowhere from the back.
yeah,
And yeah, I mean, great memories, but at the same time, it's like heartbreaking when it seems like we finally we're gonna beat them, and then something happens. So that's one of the things to highlight about the U.S. as well, and part of why I really love the sport and I love watching the World Cups, because in a way you get to see in the way the teams play, you kind of get to see the culture and the personality of the people from those countries. Like, for example, like you said earlier, you know, the U.S. is not a that big, or back then
Back
soccer
then, yeah.
wasn't a big deal, but you still have that mentality that, you know, that they're the U.S. and they're
Yeah.
the greatest country on earth, and it seems like no
American
matter what,
exceptionalism.
right? It's like no matter what which sport you're playing in, nothing is impossible, and I think that comes through. That's part of the reason why, uh, you know, despite the fact that soccer is not the main sport here in the World Cups, you can't really count the U.S. out in any game, because they're always going to put up a fight. And I think, you know, for our players, that's where, you know, we get more on the emotional side, and it's like, oh, can't believe this is happening. We're up 2-0, and then we ended up blowing it. So
That
definitely
brings
a
back
lot of
some
memories.
memories. Talk about the emotional side of stuff. I remember probably one of the most tragic moments I remember watching, and I actually made a meme with the photo of that day while I was watching that game. I looked so pissed off in the photo, but it was a game where the U.S. was playing El Salvador for, I think it was the 2006 qualifiers with Paredes, and that when the
Mm,
whole Denis
Cadenita.
Salas Cadenita situation happened, I remember just being so confused as to what had just happened. It didn't make any sense. And then when everything kind of just spilled out in front, you're like, wow. And that was a defining moment, because up to that point, Ramon Paredes had basically had this process of youngsters that won the medal at the Central American and Caribbean Games in 2002. This was 2 years later, and he was bringing basically that same core. He had to fight along the way to keep that core together, because I remember he had so much resistance by the press. He had to justify it. It was really hard for him to do so. And then this match happened, and then, yeah, that was it for him, basically. And then I remember Contreras Palma took over after that, and it was just a shit show after that. Like, it, you know, we were done. And there's a huge difference between the team that showed up for that match against the U.S. with Paredes, and then the one that Contreras Palma ultimately ended up calling in for the match at home. I just remember seeing, no disrespect to him, but I remember seeing La Perica Benitez. You know, he's like my height or shorter, and he's like, you know, he's defending guys that are like 6'1", 6'2", super fast, and I'm just like, oh man, this is not good news. But yes, granted, there's a lot of negative stuff that has happened for El Salvador against the U.S. Even cases of match fixing that we all know in a friendly match. There was even suspicion of doing so on that ill-fated 2-2 match result in 2009. Recently, things haven't gone well either. We last played them in the Gold Cup in 2017. The U.S. got a 2-0 win. Prior to that was 5-1 against the U.S. in another Gold Cup. So there's still that block, you know, that stepping block that we need to pass. Mexico, obviously, there's just something special about that match that, you know, the players elevate. I don't feel like the team ever looks down on itself or victimizes itself psychologically before a match with Mexico. I think there's this tendency against the U.S. of seeing them as this, you know, this huge contender, and I think that psychologically something happens for the most part with those matches that you don't see happen versus Mexico.
You know, we also have the interesting you know, the interesting situations that are currently happening with some of the U.S. born players that are playing for El Salvador. So it's always a nice matchup to see. You know how, you know, the Pablo Puñets and Joaquin Rivas, although he was born in El Salvador, he's lived most of his life in the U.S. I remember a few years back when we had Richard Menjivar, and it was always like a really nice to see him play against some players that he played with in the youth teams. So going back to that Olympic qualifiers, when we left the U.S. out of those qualifiers, so we've done some things. So we definitely know it's possible, and we just haven't done it at that senior level. So it should be an interesting match, whether the U.S. is able to bring all of their players or not. We might not be able to bring all of our players either. But definitely those are the matches you want to get for the friendlies.
I think little by little you're starting to see more players based abroad for El Salvador being able to play the U.S., and that must be an interesting experience for them. I know Gerson Mayen has been able to, Derby Carrillo has been able to face the U.S. Richard, like you mentioned, I remember Arturo Alvarez, one of his first games with the national team was at a away match, and I remember him doing his stutter step and driving the ball on the right side of the field. But yeah, I hope that at some point we are able to get, not just a tie or eliminate them and not celebrate that type of stuff, but just some consistency of being able to know where we're going. And to be able to get to the World Cup, you have to be able to perform against the powerhouses in your area, just like the U.S. All right, well, moving on. I know you've been busy, Hugo, this whole week, last couple of weeks. In terms of any prospects of players being able to be called up or getting their papers in check to get the national – pardon. I know it's been a busy week for you lately, Hugo, but could you give us any updates on any prospects of players that are thinking of the possibility or they've already started that process to get their citizenship?
Well, yes, it's been a busy week. We can't really go into too many details. There's a lot of things a lot of things that are in process, a lot of things in the works. And what I can say, is that from my role as a scout and what I can do, I am going to reach out to all of those players who are eligible to play for the U.S. They're going to hear from us, and we are going to support them in whatever way we can with the documentation and make them available for the coach if the coach finds that they could help the national team at some point. I'm going to make an effort, to get to contact those players, and obviously there's a lot that we know that are in the radar, the Amando Morenos, the Justin Portillo, Zabaletas. We're going to reach out and see what their interest level is and work with them. That's my job, and now that that I've been given this responsibility, I'm gonna make the best out of it, and hopefully we're gonna see it in the next qualifier. We're gonna see the results of the fruits of my labor, hopefully. So that's what I've been working towards, and yes, it's been a busy couple of weeks.
I bet, and I think more than anything, if you're a player listening and you want to have that door open to you to play for La Selecta, go get your passport right now. Just go get it done right now. Go to your nearest consulate, because you never know. Google might just call you up. But in any case, yeah, I'm looking forward to whenever the next wave of, players born abroad are finally eligible. They're in that call up, ready to go, because it has been a bit, we're going through this new generational wave. The baton is being passed, and it seems exciting with the names that have popped up and the possibilities, especially with all the time kind of lost. It's kind of a gain in a sense where you can start looking, okay, what are the possibilities out there? And with the match day not being until March, with COVID and the format of qualifiers still being in the air, because I don't think they're going to be able to pull off this whole 10-match situation to qualify. It's even better for La Selecta in that sense to try and get papers in check and just have the most amount of tools available.
All right, guys. So, definitely a lot to talk about today. We love having guests here, but there's a lot that we can cover and talk about, and it's always fun to get together, with Andres and talk about the subject that that gets us pumped and passionate about La Selecta. So thank you. I mean, I just want to say thank you all for listening to our podcast, for watching the videos, for following us on social media. We definitely look forward to more episodes to come and more guests. So, you're going to be seeing a combination of guests and coming to the show, and Andres and I just, like we did today, there's something interesting going on, and we just basically talk about that. So thanks for your following, for sharing the videos, and if you have any friends, that feel passionate about La Selecta like we do, and for different reasons, like
if you need conversation pieces for Thanksgiving or Christmas, catch up on our episodes. You'll have plenty to talk about with your family. It isn't politics or COVID.
And enjoy your panes con chumpe. Salvadoran style.
With tamalitos. Anyway, we'll continue.
It's Thanksgiving. Not
true.
Christmas.
That's true. But still, I mean, you don't have to be Orthodox at Thanksgiving. You can switch it up a little bit. Anyway, everybody, safe travels if you're traveling and you're in the U.S. celebrating Thanksgiving. For everyone else, thanks again for tuning in. We're going to do our best to come back next week. It is going to be a little tricky with vacations, people being busy, but if we can get one out there, we will. Again, thanks so much for tuning in. We're getting a lot of good feedback. It's nice seeing the views going up, the likes going up, and that's what we do this for, is to share all this stuff with you guys. So definitely thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next time. Have a good one.